Welcome to the Crime Survivor Speak podcast. My name is Aswad Thomas. I'm the National Director of Crime Survivor Speak. We are a national network of over 200,000 crime victims from across the country. If you haven't already subscribed to stay up to date on the latest episodes, you can do that on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other streaming services by clicking on the link on your screen or going to the website at www.cssj.org/podcast. I'm here with another amazing person that I've been able to get to know the past few years, Sommer Alexander, Texas chapter coordinator for TimeDone, and a Reentry Peer Support Specialist with the Texas Harm Reduction Alliance. Drawn from her own lived experience with incarceration and reentry, through her advocacy, community outreach, and record expungement events, she's helping to transform how Texas understands justice, healing, and real community safety. And she's leading our TimeDone work in the state of Texas. Sommer, welcome to the Crime Survivor Speak podcast.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and be a part of this conversation.
I want to dive right in. Can you share a bit from your experience that led you into this work and how you found yourself coordinating with the Texas chapter of TimeDone?
Absolutely. I spent 3 years in a carceral system within Texas, and I came home. Within a year of me getting out, I had to go find housing for myself, which was a complete challenge as somebody who is system impacted. I actually came from a neighborhood that was much worse than the one I was moving into. However, it was not conducive with the changes that I had made in my life and what we view as safe. 2 months after moving into that apartment complex, I ended up, as well as the person that I was in a relationship with, ended up victims of a stabbing. So for me, that got me into a position of being unhoused. I filed for victims' compensation and so forth, and I was denied, right? And so I realized at that point that there was a lot of fractured parts in our systems. And that is how I fell into the advocacy field. And so I first became a homeless ambassador, where I sat in city council meetings and things of that nature. And then I became aware of some organizations in Austin that were nonprofits fighting for justice reform. And once I entered into those organizations is when I met another individual by the name of Maggie Luna, who then in turn put me in contact with TimeDone. I got into TimeDone and I instantly fell in love with the idea of justice reform. And I was like, this is me. This is what's happened to me. That's the baseline of how I got into the work. It was all organic. It was all life experience. And quite frankly, to me, it was really ordained by God because everything perfectly aligned with the calling after I almost lost my life.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. I wanted to point out what you've elevated, which is your own victimization. That led to a lot of barriers, right? Barriers in the state's victim compensation program, barriers which resulted in you becoming unhoused and not getting access to services. And all of that negative experience of being a survivor led you into advocacy. This summer at our Healing and Safety Conference in Atlanta, one of the highlights for me was the panel that we had at that conference on the victimization to prison pipeline, where you spoke powerfully about your personal experience and the experience of system-impacted folks. Can you talk a little bit more about how that plays out in Texas communities and what needs to change in how we respond to victimization so does it turn into cycles of violence and criminalization?
Absolutely. The way that I view it is really simple. In this state, people are not recognized as victims of anything if you have a carceral system record. That is how it goes. I can tell you that had we have been victims of a crime and not had a criminal record, this probably would not be the same conversation. I would have received help. I filed for victims' compensation, and I was told that it didn't happen in my house. It happened in my car, so there was nothing they could do. I was forced to spend my last bit of savings to get my own vehicle back from the police department. We lost everything. We lost every single thing we had. And I was left, like I told y'all before, on the streets, homeless. I had to go back to selling narcotics. I also, let me mention, ended up back in my addiction. And so that's how that whole vicious cycle just started recycling itself all over again. Whereas somebody in another side of town in Austin, right, that's not system impacted, that doesn't face these barriers and so forth, they would not have went through that. They would have gotten at least $3,000 to $5,000 to relocate. Their medical bills, therapy, anything that they needed over the next several years of their life would have been taken care of, and they would have been given the resources they needed. In addition to court advocacy, which didn't happen in our case. It was really hard for me to process for a long time. I was very angry. I had just gotten connected with my children back in my home, and they were again ripped from me and placed in places that they were living before. I had very bad injuries. I couldn't use my left hand at the time because during the stabbing, it was almost severed off. So I barely could use my hand, and it was exposed so much. Because of me being unhoused, I had multiple infections that had caused it to be reopened again. So much so that I ended up on the highest level of antibiotics possible. I had a huge gash in my back down into my spine. It had to be changed out with wrapping every day. I was left that way on the streets. It's a bad situation when you're formerly incarcerated. It's bad enough trying to get a job and get housed. And when you get housing, you're forced to live in places not conducive with anything you've done to make your life better. I got through it through being a Texas chapter coordinator and being around other people that were justice impacted. People had gotten through really hard times and found jobs, and I could see success in some of the stories. And so that gave me the fortitude to go forward. So I was able to really go through the systems and start seeing how bad it is in Texas. Texas is really, really backdated within the court systems. They are really backed up in reference to expungement, non-disclosure, things of that nature, right? We don't really have a unified framework across the state. Access to opportunities and resources depends on where you live, not what you need. For example, in Travis County or Bexar County, you might see more openness to second chances, diversion programs, harm reduction efforts, and so forth. But if you go to some rural areas, you're not going to get that same inviting feeling or open discussion about it. If you are somebody who's system impacted, the outcome of the court system processes is going to be very different, just like the victim's compensation is very different.
So unfortunate. Very similar to you in Texas, over 9 million people live with an old record. Many of them were survivors who never got support. Curious from your personal experience and your professional experience, what kind of resources or interventions do you think could break that cycle of pain, trauma, and incarceration?
Breaking that cycle means we have to reimagine what public safety means. Safety isn't about how many people we can lock up. It's really about how many people we can lift up to a point where they can survive and thrive. We really need to start reimagining fundamental programming that's built into our neighborhoods so that we can bring back the theme of having a village, because it really does take a village to bring somebody back from incarceration or from being a victim of a crime. First, we need trauma-informed, community-based response systems. When I became a survivor of the crime, they have a victim's compensation in place, right? Texas victim compensation. But there was no compensation of any kind. We were forced into the streets because we couldn't pay the rent. We should have had opportunities to meet with counselors or a case manager. In fact, we didn't have any of those things. It was a complete moment of, what do we do now? And that's the same thing that happens across the board in these communities because we're not facing the real issue. Second, we need true reentry infrastructure. We need peer support that really supports individuals coming home. One of the models I've been looking at as far as reentry goes is a program designed where when a person is coming out of county jail or a state facility, they are met with their peer support months before their release, not when they get out, months before. Reason being, that gives them the chance to get to know each other, number one, and for that peer support specialist to really be able to determine what is really going on. What kind of trauma have they been through? When they leave here, if they do have somewhere to go, what's that household like? Is that going to be triggering to them? Really take time. By giving them that time, you build a very, very strong relationship with your peer support. Additionally, what that peer support person would be doing while determining what that person is going to need is they would actually be getting with different organizations that that person may need help with. Let's say that my friend here was getting out and he needed services with integral care, but he also needed to get with TWC because he wants to work. And maybe he needed to get with Travis County Reentry too. Well, those 3 caseworkers, the day prior to him getting out, we are actually going to meet him on a Zoom so he can meet his village before he comes home, so that he doesn't walk out and feel completely paralyzed by trying to navigate the world again. When you come back into the world, it's almost unnerving because you're so stimulated. By having these systems in place and already connecting people who are re-entering after being in a prison, especially a male prison, those are very traumatic for men. And so when they come back and when they know that they've got loving support around them and they already have that bond built with them, that is going to ensure and give this person a level of trust that they probably have not, if ever, experienced. Really digging deep into bringing that village close to the youth and building the foundation of the community and trust level all over again. I think we will see a lot of things organically change. When a program like this rolls out, once those systems are in sync, it's going to be a game changer. I promise you will see recidivism change. Third, we need policy level compassion. Automatic record clearing laws, clean slate policies, they have got to start going into effect. There's got to be some change here in Texas. You cannot have 10 million people living with an old record, 1 in 3 people in a room, and not really start considering that clean slate policy might be something we need to talk about. We have got to put people in a position to where we're able to wipe away barriers that keep people trapped in a constant mode of survival. They have a record, they can't get a job. If they can get one, it's $7.25 an hour. And then you want them to not commit a crime to make sure that they have somewhere to live, to be safe. I don't understand it. Even now, as a reentry specialist, I struggle with that, getting people housed. I struggle with getting them in a position where they don't feel like they have to reoffend to take care of their family. And so if Texas really wants to reduce incarceration, we're going to have to fund healing, not punishment, and we've got to build networks of care.
That's the experience of a lot of people. Often where you live, your zip code determines your life experiences and also your life path. I remember I was in grad school years ago. There was a New York Times article about 1.5 million missing Black men. And the majority of those missing Black men are absent from our families and our communities due to early deaths or because they were locked up, impacted by both the victimization and also incarceration with little to no resources and support to navigate those experiences. But you've been working to kind of really lead and change that and building out our TimeDone work in Texas. I would love for you to talk about your experience as the Texas chapter coordinator for TimeDone. What have you seen are like some of the strategies that you have used that have helped to engage and empower chapter members who may have never seen themselves as part of the movement?
I'm focused on building a coalition. The goal here is to build it from the ground up with people that are system impacted, people that are survivors, people that are both. You can be indirectly system impacted. Your mom, dad, your husband, kids, those people are also affected when a person goes to a carceral system. They are truly affected. They cry, they miss us, their lives aren't the same. They have to pay for everything for us too, and that's not really cool, right? Everybody gets affected. And so we also have those people as members of the coalition as well because their voice matters too. We're identifying leaders in different regions. We have 7 or 8 leads, 1 in El Paso, 2 in San Antonio, 1 in the Rio Grande Valley area. I have 1 in Houston, and then I have 2 more that I've added into Austin. I am looking still to get somebody in Fort Worth. From those cities that we've already got the leads in, from there we'll branch out into the rural counties and really touch down into those areas because those are the unheard areas. We're really going to be intentional about connecting them with tools, training, and platforms that teach them how to lead. By 2027, they can use their voice, tell their story, and feel empowered and inspire the movement. The numbers grow by the day. We have the ability to vote and to put who we want into office and positions of power. And so people are finally starting to use their voice and use their power to vote. That's where the real movement starts. When survivors, reentry advocates, and community healers unite to rewrite this narrative, we then will be able to combine lived experience with policy knowledge. And I do believe that when we build this survivor and system impacted led coalition, we're going to show the country what true people-powered justice reform looks like. We have to have people in place that not only understand what trauma is, but they know how to navigate these systems. And that means you're going to have to take people that have lived experience, people that have not just come out of the carceral systems and they got a job, but people that have really endured the struggle. They've went through all of these systematic barriers and they've conquered them. Because I don't need somebody telling me how to try and get through something if you've never gotten through it. When I educated my team of leads in the Texas chapter, the first thing I did was let them know, look, across our state right now, we have 7 different people. One thing I can bet each one of you needs to understand is that whether you go into your personal city and you go to the poorest side of town to the richest, there's going to be a lack of understanding about what is actually happening and the dynamics of reentry and being incarcerated and how that works. And you're talking about people that work for the justice system in the jails, the reentry programs, and so forth. It's the lack of communication between social classes and the lack of education keeping us from moving forward. And so as the Texas chapter coordinator, my goal has been to tackle that part of it. So we rolled out education on expungement 3 months ago. 2 months ago, I had my first virtual expungement clinic with a reentry task force in El Paso.
And you mentioned that a lot of people have records out here. I think there's an estimated 78 million Americans across this country. That's about 1 in 3 adults have an old criminal record, right? Millions of people in Texas have an old record and face barriers, which is why it's important for you to be not only just educating people across those social classes, but also uplifting the importance of coming together in those spaces. So you mentioned the virtual event in El Paso. For folks who are listening and want to learn more about what happens at this type of expungement event, can you walk us through what happens at one of those events and what are some barriers people face when trying to get their records sealed or cleared in the state of Texas?
It's strictly an educational event. I want to make that clear. We don't seal records, but they are educational pieces. What's the difference between non-disclosure and expungement? How do these processes work? Do I qualify for non-disclosure? Do I qualify for an expungement? And the reason we really break it down, and there's like so many dynamics to it, and we are really trying to be very detail-oriented about understanding, is because it's a constant legal moving part in Texas. You may have the same exact charge as one person, same exact charge, but yours doesn't qualify, and they do. So what we try to do at these events is get them educated on how you would go about the process. Based on the location that we're doing the event in, I have tried to make it possible to always have a handout for that local area, because the other huge component about Texas's expungement and non-disclosure is every county does it differently. Austin might be more expensive than Houston. Austin may not do an expungement clinic the same way that Houston does an expungement clinic, because they want their expungement clinic to go through a certain background check as far as the DA is concerned. So the DA systems have a lot to do with the way an expungement is approved. Of course, the judge has a say in that as well. One of the questions I first presented when learning about this from the lawyers at Texas Fair Defense Project was, in order to have an actual expungement clinic or a fair that is actually processing or doing any type of record repair, they would have to be approved by the DA's office. She said those people would have to have submitted their record into the DA's office. After they've viewed the record, they look at it, they determine whether they want to approve that. And if they do, then they move it forward in the process. And if not, they don't. You could have whatever legal professional you want fill out the expungement paperwork, file it. But if that county that you receive that conviction in, their DA's office does not approve it, you're not getting a non-disclosure or an expungement. That's it. They make the decision. That still leaves so much room for like injustice and prejudice within communities, especially think about rural areas. If you live in a small town and they don't like you, you might have a problem. That's not how our justice system is supposed to be structured.
Wow. I just learned a lot from this conversation. In Texas, expungement can remove some entries from adult criminal history, but it's very limited. And that's different from non-disclosures, which hides certain records from public disclosure, but they are still visible to certain criminal justice agencies, licensing agencies, and certain government entities. In Texas, your time is never done, right? Which is just remarkable how you've been able to build TimeDone in Texas, how you've been able to identify and develop leaders, but also how you are really focusing on education, which is so important. But as we kind of wrap up this conversation, Sommer, we'd love for you to kind of share what gives you hope. What message would you like to leave with our listeners, especially those who may feel stuck by a conviction or record?
What gives me hope isn't just seeing systems change. It's watching people change. It's seeing someone who once felt invisible finally really realize that they matter. It's watching people come home from incarceration, broken, scared, not knowing what they're going to do, pretty much already in their mind knowing or feeling like they know that they're going to fail again. You work with them and slowly see them rebuilding their lives. That's where my hope comes from. I'll be honest, this last year, it tested that hope in so many ways. On August 30th last year, my fiance lost his life in a car accident. He was more than my fiance, he was my best friend. When I lost Sherman, I had to not lose hope. I had to, first of all, become determined that that was not an option because I know that's not what he would have wanted. We went through one of the most brutal experiences a person can survive. We were both stabbed nearly to death. We were left fighting for our lives. And even after surviving all of that, the system failed us again. We became unhoused. We were criminalized instead of cared for. There was no real safety net for victims. They didn't care about us because we were also system impacted. And so in their eyes, we were just, a couple felons, must have been doing something wrong. We weren't victims in their eyes. That lack of compassion and lack of true victim support, it's what pushed both of us back into the very systems that should have been helping us heal. Losing Sherman has been one of the hardest things I've ever lived through. He wasn't just my partner, he was part of my purpose. While God had other plans for him, I promised myself that from now until the day that I go home, I'll carry that forward for us because he was very passionate about what he saw coming for me when he came home this time and the work I was putting in for the community. You could see a glow in his eyes. What gives me hope now is legacy, knowing that through the pain, there's still a calling on my life to fight for change. I'm going to use all of that energy, emotions, feelings of loss and pain and turn it into purpose. I'm going to continue to raise awareness about our justice system, how it impacts not just individuals, but families and generations long term. I'm going to make sure that I continue to fight, not just for Sherman, but for other people that we've lost along the way. To anyone listening who might feel stuck because of an old record or feel like because they grew up a certain way or were only subjected to certain types of environments, that narrative can never change, I want to challenge you that it can. Please hear me when I say you are not that conviction. You are worthy, filled with purpose, and you can do anything that you put your mind to. You still have worth. And there is still life after loss, after prison, after pain, after all of it. Every day I work with women and men that have faced these systems, whether it's CPS or it's the carceral systems, probation, parole, all of the different dynamics of it. They come home, they have the best plan in their head about how this is going to work. And what we have to remember as both the person going through the experience and as a person that is indirectly impacted, that is a part of that person's life, is that there are going to be barriers you face, right, that are really hard and systemically we've been taught we won't beat them. But you can. It's very easy. You just take one step at a time. You get a job, save your money. Find housing. If you need housing in Texas, I can help you with that. Get you a good, strong, sustainable structure in your life. And remember, you are not what they taught you in the system. God can take the ugliest storms, and I'm a living testament of that. And he can turn them into something powerful. Even when it feels like you've lost everything, keep going. Because you never know who's watching your strength and finding hope in your fight. You have the power every single day when you get up to make another decision that's going to impact the rest of your life and the narrative of the path you go down. And maybe today you messed up and you made some bad decisions, right? But tomorrow you can get back up and you can get back on that right path. I pushed forward and I found something that felt good and that felt real to me, and that was justice reform. And that was being bold enough to say, I know you screwed me. I know the system isn't right. And I'm going to do something about it. I found that passion and I never gave up. And I want to throw in that I did fail. To whoever listens to this, I failed. I got back in my addiction. I got back up. But if I never kept hope and faith, I wouldn't be here today. And so my hope for you is no matter how many times you fail, you remember it's about finding something that you love and like knowing that whatever your heart believes in, if it's right, then do it. If you do them organically and you stay focused away from the extra stuff we're used to, life will change. But always remember, you only get one chance. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. You may not feel like you have the education to get a good job or be anything other than somebody that sells dope, but you absolutely do. You don't have to give up because you dropped out of school.
Wow. Your courage and commitment inspire me and so many people across this country. And your leadership reminds us transformation is not only possible, but it's happening every day in our communities, thanks to individuals like yourself. And you've turned your story into purpose. You've helped countless others see that redemption and healing can walk hand in hand. To everyone listening to today's episode, you want to learn more about TimeDone, you want to be part of TimeDone in Texas, join Sommer in her fight in Texas, go to the website at www.timedone.org. We'll also make sure you are plugged in to the amazing work Sommer is doing in Texas and that TimeDone is doing across the country. Our work at TimeDone has always been in good hands, and even more with leaders like you, especially in a state like Texas. So thank you for all that you've been doing across Texas. Thank you for your commitment to our TimeDone program. We're excited for you to continue educating folks in Texas, but also building leaders and building power across the state. Thank you all so much to everyone for listening to today's episode. Once again, if you want to become a member of Crime Survivors Speak, go to www.csj.org to join TimeDone. Go to www.timedone.org. Tune into all podcast episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other streaming platforms. Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.